The gavel smashed against the mahogany block like a bone snapping in a silent room. Sold. For $50 million to the gentleman in the front row, the auctioneer barked, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and greed. I stood frozen in the back of the hall, the thin fabric of my $5 thrift store dress itching against my skin as 1,000 pairs of eyes, dripping with judgment and diamonds, swung toward me. Julian, the man who had promised to love me until his last breath before throwing me into the street for a billionaire's daughter, leaned back in his front row seat. He smirked, swirling a glass of vintage scotch that cost more than my father's life-saving surgery. "Don't look so surprised, Clara," he called out, his voice amplified by the stunned silence of the room. "You can't bid with tears and empty pockets. Security, please remove this eyesore. She's bringing down the property value of the entire block." Two massive guards in charcoal suits stepped from the shadows, their fingers locking onto my bruised forearms. This was the moment the world turned black. This was the moment I realized that in a world of gold, a heart of flesh is just a target. But you see my shaking hands and my faded shoes, and you don't see the black SUV idling at the curb. You don't see the man who watched every second of my humiliation through a hidden lens, his jaw tightening until the glass in his hand shattered. This is a story of how a woman who had nothing discovered that the most dangerous man in the country was willing to burn the world down just to see her smile again. 6 months ago, I was wearing a diamond the size of a grape and planning a wedding in Lake Como. Now, I scrub floors at the very hotel Julian owns. I didn't come to this auction to win. I came to reclaim the only thing my mother left me, a sapphire pendant Julian had stolen and put up for sale to mock my poverty. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing the single crumpled $20 bill I had saved by skipping meals for a month. I knew the moment the guards dragged me toward the exit that my last link to my family was gone. "Wait," a voice boomed from the back of the hall. It wasn't loud, but it had the weight of a falling mountain. The double doors didn't just open, they groaned on their hinges as if the air itself was trying to escape. A man stepped through the threshold, flanked by 4 shadows that moved with the synchronized lethality of a wolf pack. He wore a suit of midnight silk, and on his lapel was a pin of a silver dragon coiled around a blood-red ruby. The room went cold. Julian's smirk didn't just fade, it evaporated. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over. "Mr. Volkov?" he stammered, his face turning the color of ash. We weren't expecting." Dante Volkov didn't look at Julian. He didn't look at the auctioneer. He walked straight through the center of the hall, the crowd parting like a sea of glass. He stopped inches from the guards holding me. He didn't say a word. He simply tilted his head, and the guards scrambled backward as if they had been touched by a live wire. Dante reached out, his hand gloved in soft black leather, and tucked a stray hair behind my ear. His touch was cold, but his eyes burned with a protective fire that made my breath hitch. "I believe the lady hasn't finished her bid," Dante whispered. He turned to the auctioneer, his gaze turning into a blade. $100 million. For the pendant. And another $100 million for the building we are standing in. The gavel didn't fall this time. The auctioneer dropped it. Julian took a step forward, his fists clenched. "You can't do this, Volkov. She's a nobody. She's a thief who..." Dante moved faster than the eye could follow. He didn't strike Julian. He simply leaned into his space, his presence suffocating the air out of the room. "She is the woman who is going to decide whether you leave this room through the door or in a bag," Dante said, his voice a low, melodic growl. He turned back to me, his hand extending in a silent invitation. "Clara, the sapphire is yours. Along with everything else he took. What is your first command?" I looked at Julian, the man who had laughed while I begged for my mother's medicine. Then I looked at Dante, the man they called the Ghost of Moscow. I took a breath, the first one that didn't feel like swallowing glass. I reached out and took Dante's hand. "Take his seat," I said. Julian's eyes went wide as Dante's men moved in. The auction wasn't over. The real bidding for Julian's life had just begun. Dante led me to the front row, his hand resting firmly on the small of my back as Julian was dragged to the corner like a piece of discarded furniture. The sapphire pendant sat on a velvet cushion on the stage, glowing like a blue star. Dante didn't wait for the auctioneer to hand it over. He walked onto the stage, took the pendant, and stepped back down. He stood behind me, the cold metal of the chain brushing my neck as he fastened it. "This belonged to a queen," he murmured in my ear, his breath smelling of expensive tobacco and rain. "It's back where it belongs. If you believe Julian deserves to lose every cent he ever stole from Clara, hit the like button so this story reaches the people who need to see justice served." Suddenly, the lights in the hall flickered. A high-pitched whine filled the room, and the giant LED screens displaying the bids began to scramble into lines of red code. A voice crackled over the speakers, cold and distorted. Dante Volkov. You've wandered far from your territory for a piece of glass. Dante didn't flinch. He stepped in front of me, his hand disappearing into his jacket. The council, he hissed. He looked at his lead guard, a man named Victor who looked like he was carved from granite. Get her to the car. Now. Victor grabbed my arm, but we didn't make it 3 steps before the skylights shattered. Men in black tactical gear rappelled down on ropes, their suppressed rifles spitting silent death into the crowd. Panic erupted. Billionaires screamed and dove under tables, their dignity vanishing faster than their fortunes. Clara, run. Dante roared, spinning around and firing 2 rounds into the chest of a descending assassin. I sprinted toward the service exit, my lungs screaming as the smell of gunpowder filled the hall. I burst through the doors into a narrow concrete hallway, my heels clicking frantically against the floor. I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, rhythmic, and fast. I didn't look back until I reached the heavy steel fire door. I turned the handle, but it was locked. I spun around, my back against the steel. It wasn't an assassin. It was Julian. He was panting, his expensive suit torn, a jagged piece of glass from a broken bottle in his hand. You think you can just walk away with him? He spat, his eyes bloodshot. You think you're special now because a monster bought you? Give me the pendant, Clara. It's the only thing I have left to pay my debts. I looked at the glass shard in his hand, then at the man I had once thought I would spend my life with. I didn't feel fear. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. You never loved me, Julian. You only loved the way I made you feel powerful. But you're not powerful anymore. I lunged forward, not away from him, but toward him. I grabbed his wrist, the glass grazing my shoulder, and slammed his hand against the concrete wall. He cried out, the bottle fragment clattering to the floor. I didn't stop. I drove my knee into his stomach the way my father had taught me when I was a girl. Julian collapsed, gasping for air. Clara. Dante's voice echoed down the hall. He appeared at the end of the corridor, his shirt stained with blood that wasn't his. He saw Julian on the floor and me standing over him. He slowed his pace, a dark, predatory smile spreading across his face. I see you didn't need my help after all, Dante said. He walked over and looked down at Julian with pure disgust. He's small. Smaller than I thought. Dante looked at me, his eyes searching mine. We have to go. The council has blocked the streets. If we stay here, we're surrounded. He grabbed my hand and led me toward a small, inconspicuous door hidden behind a stack of crates. We emerged into a rain-slicked alleyway where a matte black armored SUV was idling. We dived inside just as a black sedan screeched around the corner, its windows rolling down to reveal the muzzles of submachine guns. Drive, Dante commanded. The SUV lurched forward, the bullets thudding harmlessly against the reinforced glass like heavy rain. We tore through the narrow streets of the Diamond District, the tires screaming as we took corners on 2 wheels. Dante was on a radio, barking orders in a language I didn't understand, his face a mask of cold fury. The Mediterranean breeze was cold, but the weight of the man stepping onto the balcony was colder. Dante didn't turn. He didn't have to. The safety on a Beretta clicked off behind us, a sound that had become the heartbeat of our new life. The funds didn't all go to the families, Clara, a voice rasped. It was Victor, Dante's most trusted shadow. But he wasn't standing in a bow. He was standing with a barrel leveled at the base of Dante's skull. 20 million is missing. The council's ghosts aren't happy. Dante didn't move a muscle. He kept his eyes on the horizon, his hand tightening on the railing until the marble groaned. I didn't take it, Victor. You know my books. I know your books, Victor said, his finger tightening on the trigger. But I also know the girl who swallowed the key. She's the only one who could have rerouted the final transfer. Dante finally turned, his gaze sliding to me. It wasn't a look of betrayal, it was a look of profound, terrifying realization. He saw the way I was holding my glass, not with the trembling fingers of a victim, but with the steady grip of a woman who had learned exactly how much a secret was worth in the dark. The architect's blood. If you believe that Clara was right to keep a safety net, after everything the world took from her, hit the like button so this story reaches the survivors who know that trust is a luxury the poor can't afford. I didn't reroute it to a bank, Dante, I said, my voice as calm as the sea below. I rerouted it to a trust for the dockworkers' children in Seoul. The people Julian's father crushed to build his first skyscraper. Victor's eyes flickered. For a second, the professional killer hesitated. But the radio on his shoulder chirped, a high-frequency signal that meant the cleanup crew was already in the lobby. The council doesn't care about charity, Clara. They want their pound of flesh. And since you spent their money, they've authorized me to take yours. Victor, don't, Dante warned, his voice dropping into that low, subsonic register that usually preceded a massacre. Step aside, boss. This is business. I stepped forward, placing myself directly in front of the gun. I looked Victor in the eye, the man who had watched me scrub floors just weeks ago. You think killing me solves the problem? The transfer is timed. If my heartbeat stops for more than 60 seconds, the encryption on the rest of the council's hidden assets, the other 4 billion, self-destructs. You'll be the man who cost the most dangerous people on Earth their entire future. I pointed to the thin silver band on my wrist. It wasn't jewelry. A tiny red light pulsed in sync with my pulse. A dead man's switch. Victor lowered the gun an inch. You're bluffing. Try me, I whispered. I've spent my life losing things. I'm very good at it. Are you? The tension in the air was so thick it felt like it would ignite. Dante moved then, a blur of motion. He didn't go for his gun. He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the edge of the balcony. Victor, tell them we're dead. Take the car in the garage and disappear. If you stay, they'll kill you just for knowing her name. Victor looked at the gun, then at us. The sirens were already screaming up the winding mountain road. He spat on the marble, shoved the pistol into his waistband and turned toward the stairs. You have 1 hour. Then I tell them the truth. Dante didn't waste a second. He grabbed a hidden latch under the railing, and a section of the floor slid back to reveal a high-speed zip line anchored to the cliffside. We can't go to the airport. They own the sky. We're going to the water. Dante, wait, I said as he clipped me into the harness. If we leave, we lose the leverage. The switch only works if I'm near a transmitter. The transmitter is in the boat, he said, his eyes burning into mine. I told you, Clara. I was building something they could never touch. I just didn't realize you were building it too. We leaped. The world turned into a roar of wind and salt spray. The zip line hissed as we plummeted toward the black water of the cove below. We hit the deck of a sleek, matte gray interceptor boat just as the first explosion rocked the villa above us. The balcony where we had stood seconds ago vanished in a fireball of orange and black. Dante slammed the throttles forward. The boat surged, its bow lifting as we tore through the waves at 60 knots. Behind us, 3 sets of headlights appeared on the coastal road, following our wake like hungry eyes. They're not stopping, Dante. I yelled over the engine roar. They can't stop, he shouted back. The chairman didn't just want the money. He wanted the ledger of names. The names of every politician and judge the council has bought for the last 30 years. It's on the card you swallowed, isn't it? I looked away. The salt air stung my eyes. It's not on a card. It's in my head. My father made me memorize the ledger when I was 10. He called it the bedtime story. I didn't realize until last night that the names weren't characters. They're the men running this country. Dante steered the boat into a narrow sea cave, the engine echoing off the jagged rocks. He cut the lights and we drifted in the sudden, deafening silence. The only sound was the lap of water against the hull and my own ragged breathing. You're a walking death warrant, Clara, Dante said, leaning back against the helm. He reached out and touched the sapphire on my neck. As long as you're alive, the world as they know it is at risk. Then why did you save me? I asked. You could have taken the sapphire and let Julian have me. You would have been a billionaire 10 times over. Dante stepped into my space, his presence filling the dark cabin. He didn't answer with words. He reached out, his hand cupping the back of my neck, and pulled me into a kiss that tasted of salt, desperation, and a promise he hadn't yet voiced. It wasn't the kiss of a savior, it was the kiss of a partner in crime. Because I'm tired of working for ghosts, he whispered against my lips. I want to own the cemetery. Suddenly the cave lit up. A searchlight from the mouth of the tunnel swept across the water, illuminating the stalactites like giant teeth. A megaphone boomed, the voice amplified and distorted by the rock. Clara. This is Julian. I know you're in there. My blood turned to ice. Julian. He hadn't been arrested. He had been recycled. The council gave me a choice, Clara. Julian's voice echoed, dripping with a new hollow kind of madness. Bring them your head or lose mine. I've always been a salesman, remember? I'm here to close the deal. Dante reached for the ignition, but I put my hand on his. No. If we run, they'll just trap us at the exit. We have to do what my father did. What's that? We changed the story. I stood up and walked to the edge of the boat. I grabbed the flare gun from the emergency kit and stepped onto the small rocky ledge of the cave. Julian, I screamed. You want the ledger? You want the names? The searchlight swung toward me, blinding me. I could see the silhouette of a large Coast Guard cutter at the cave entrance. Julian was standing on the bow, looking like a ghost of the man I once loved. Throw the stone, Clara, and maybe I'll let the Russian live as a stowaway. The stone is empty, Julian. The names are in my mind. I held the flare gun up, pointing it not at the boat but at the ceiling of the cave. What are you doing? Julian yelled, his voice cracking. I'm ending the auction, I said. I pulled the trigger. The flare screeched upward, hitting a massive, unstable cluster of stalactites directly above the narrowest part of the cave entrance. The red phosphorus ignited, the heat and impact shattering the limestone. With a roar that sounded like the earth tearing in half, the ceiling collapsed. Tons of rock plummeted into the water, creating a massive wall of stone that sealed the cave shut. The shockwave knocked me backward into Dante's arms as the entrance vanished behind a mountain of debris. Silence returned. Total, suffocating darkness. Clara. Dante's voice was a whisper in the black. You just trapped us in a tomb. No, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the waterproof light. I clicked it on, illuminating the back of the cave. My father didn't just memorize the names, Dante. He mapped the tunnels. This cave connects to the old Roman cisterns under the city. There's a way out. But only for people who aren't afraid of the dark. Dante looked at the wall of rock, then at me. He started to laugh, a low, genuine sound that echoed off the damp walls. A maid, a queen, and now a ghost. Is there anything else I should know about you? I stepped into the shallow water, heading for the hidden crevice in the back of the cave. Just one thing, I said, looking back at him. I'm still hungry. We disappeared into the narrow tunnel, leaving the council, the money, and Julian behind in the dust. The world thought we were buried. They thought the secret was dead. But as we emerged 3 hours later into the basement of an old cathedral in the heart of the city, I looked at the morning sun hitting the stained glass. I reached into my collar and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper I had kept hidden in my shoe. It wasn't the ledger. It was a list of every person who had helped me when I was a maid, the cook who gave me extra bread, the janitor who hid me from Julian's temper. The council is gone, I said to Dante as we stepped into the crowded street, looking like two more travelers in the sea of faces. But the people who built their empire are still here. And I think it's time they got a raise. Dante adjusted his jacket, his eyes scanning the crowd for threats, but his hand stayed firmly in mine. Where do we start? I looked at the tallest building in the skyline, the Thorn Plaza. At the top, I said. I hear they have an opening for a CEO. And I've already got the uniform. I dropped the sapphire pendant into a nearby sewer grate. I didn't need the stone anymore. I was the fire. The lobby of Thorn Plaza smelled like expensive lilies and old lies. I walked through the revolving doors, the click of my 4-inch stilettos sounding like the rhythmic beat of a war drum against the polished granite. I wasn't wearing polyester today. I was draped in a structured ivory power suit that cost more than my father's entire workshop. Behind me, Dante moved like a predator in a tuxedo, his presence clearing a path through the morning rush of terrified interns and scurrying executives. "Ma'am, you can't go up without an appointment," the receptionist squeaked, her hand hovering over the security button. I didn't stop. I leaned over the desk, pulling my sunglasses down just enough for her to see the cold, blue fire in my eyes. "Tell the board of directors that the girl who used to clean their toilets is here to collect the keys to the building." The boardroom reckoning. If you think the look on the receptionist's face was worth every floor Clara ever scrubbed, hit the like button so this story finds everyone who's ever been told they don't belong in the room. We reached the 60th floor. The double mahogany doors of the boardroom swung open with a bang. 12 men in gray suits sat frozen around a table that could have seated 30. At the head of the table sat a man I didn't recognize, a placeholder, a suit with no soul. He looked up, his jaw dropping as I threw a heavy leather-bound ledger onto the center of the table. "The council is dead," I said, my voice echoing off the floor-to-ceiling glass. "The chairman is a memory. Julian is a ghost in a cave. And this ledger contains every offshore account, every bribe, and every blackmail photo your organization has used to keep Thorn Plaza standing." The placeholder stood up, his face reddening. "This is an illegal takeover. You're a maid. A thief. Security." Dante stepped forward, the silver dragon on his lapel catching the light. He didn't pull a gun. He simply placed a single tablet on the table and hit play. The screen showed a live feed of the Thorn Plaza stock market ticker. It was a vertical line heading straight into the abyss. In exactly 60 seconds, Dante said, his voice a calm, terrifying rumble, the public will receive an anonymous leak of the council's bedtime story. Your assets will be frozen. Your homes will be raided. Unless what? One of the board members gasped, his hands shaking as he reached for his tie. I stepped up to the head of the table, placing my hands on the leather chair. Unless you sign the company over to the Sovereign Trust, a charity dedicated to the families of the workers Julian's father exploited. You stay on as consultants, unpaid, to ensure a smooth transition. You keep your freedom. I keep the keys. You can't be serious, the placeholder hissed. You destroy a billion-dollar empire for a charity? I'm not destroying it, I said, leaning in until our noses almost touched. I'm disinfecting it. The clock on the wall ticked. 10:09. The placeholder looked at the screen. The stock hit a new low. He looked at Dante, whose hand was resting casually near the hilt of a blade hidden in his sleeve. Then he looked at me. With a trembling hand, he picked up the gold pen and signed the digital contract. I didn't wait for a thank you. I turned to the window looking out over the city of Seoul. The sun was high, burning off the last of the morning mist. Dante, I said without turning around. Yes, Clara? Tell the cleaning staff on the first floor to take the rest of the week off. With full pay. And send a crew to the Roman cisterns. I want Julian found and handed over to the authorities. Not the council's authorities. The real ones. Dante walked up behind me, his hand resting on my shoulder. The weight of it was no longer a burden. It was a foundation. And the chairman's remaining loyalists? I watched a hawk circle the top of the tower, free and lethal. Let them come. I've spent my life cleaning up after men who thought they were kings. I'm quite good at taking out the trash. I turned back to the room. The board members were scurrying out like cockroaches caught in a flashlight beam. I walked to the head of the table and sat down in the chair that Julian had once used to mock my poverty. I felt the velvet against my back, the cool air of the AC, and the heavy weight of the sapphire now resting in my pocket, not as a key but as a trophy. I looked directly into the security camera in the corner of the room, knowing that somewhere the last remnants of the old world were watching. I didn't say a word. I just reached out and clicked the close button on the digital ledger. The screen went black. The maid was gone. The queen was bored. The empress had just begun her reign. Subscribe if you believe that no matter where you start, you have the power to write your own ending.